Could you tell us your name?
My name is Joshua Rogers. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Rebecca Rogers. She's one of the deacon leaders. I myself am a deacon leader here also. We have 4 beautiful children. We're a blended family, so we have 3 beautiful girls. My hands are full. 2 of which are her daughters from a previous marriage, and I have a daughter from my previous marriage, and we have a little boy together. I like to go fishing. I don't do it as much as I like, but I'm actually in a season of service right now. I guess if you want to call service a hobby. My walk has been a very interesting walk. I didn't always know the Lord, and I always knew He was there, but I didn't necessarily need Him at the time, especially growing up, because there was just so much turmoil in my life growing up. I didn't really have much of a childhood. I didn't really have a really good home example either. So by the time I started growing up and getting older into my own ways, I didn't really have a whole lot of guidance as far as what the right path would be to take. I allowed Hollywood and other influences like that, social media and everything else, to tell me what it would mean to be a successful person in this world. So I skipped out of school. I was really into the partying scene, and a lot of drugs came early on, and alcohol and everything else came early on in my life. And I was chasing a lot of temporal peace, a lot of temporal joy. When I got older, I tended to take that same mindset, mentality with me as I grew up, working my way up the ladder in certain companies and whatnot. I became a operations manager for a warehouse. I was making really good money. So I told myself, okay, I needed to build my own kingdom in a sense, right? Just be able to check off the boxes of what this world means to be happy, or what it means to be a man, or whatever it is that means that you're a successful person. So I went and I married a woman at 25, bought my first house. I didn't stop at the house. I got the cars and turned my garage into like a man cave / car garage / bar / part. So my house was just always about entertaining and just having the latest things. If I went nice big flat screen TV and everything else, just always filling this giant God-sized hole in my heart with all this material stuff to be able to try, like I said, build that kingdom, build something bigger than myself, right? Because I had something to prove, right? I came from nothing, but I needed to make sure that everybody knew that I was better than that. Right? So I had something to prove. So you finally get all this stuff, which is great, and but then after a while, it just becomes that stuff, and then you have to get more, and then you're trying to, it's kind of like an addiction, if I could put it that way. You're always chasing the next best thing, because once you get there, you're feeling so good about it, and then it comes and then it goes, just like that. So people would come over, they eat my food, they would drink my wine and everything else, and they would leave. And then that would still leave me at home with a very disgruntled wife. Kind of grew tired of each other, especially there was no real love connection, it was all lust. So we were just kind of going through the motions. So with that being said, and when no one else is looking, it was really hard. It was very, very small increments that led to bigger and bigger things. Dissatisfaction in one another. So my ex at the time started seeing other people. Then I in turn started seeing other people. Now we're chasing that fulfillment again, but now looking outside of our relationship, outside the home. Before we know it, it went from dissatisfaction all the way to distrust to where we ended up at the end was just total separation, collapse of the home.
How's it going, everyone? I want to thank Joshua Rogers, who shared his story. He's going to be featured at the beginning of every one of the sermons throughout this series, as the story maps on to the series we're going to be going through. And what you just heard is a description of how he has built his life, and then it came crashing down on the other side of that. And we'll be talking a lot about that today, so buckle up. No, I'm just kidding. But it is really good to be with you. My name is Jesse. I am the pastor for Modern Ministry here at Loma University Church. Most of my time on Saturday mornings is spent just across the courtyard at Anthem. If you didn't know, we've got 4 services across, 2 here, 2 over at Anthem. And so we've got over 500 people that are gathering together every week across the courtyard. It's been incredible to hear the stories that have come out of people experiencing worship in that way and experiencing community in some of the ways that happen over there. And I just want to share with you, if you didn't know this, that the heart behind Anthem is to be a church service, to be a church community that the next generation can call home. But we are not exclusively for the next generation. This is not a young adult thing. This is lots of people from all different age groups, all different backgrounds. It's been a lot of fun to just journey together as a community. So you are all welcome. If you ever want to come check it out, if you ever want to point anybody that you know that way, feel free. It's a lot of fun. We get to have a lot of cool things happen. So just wanted to share that. But today, we're starting a series called Too Busy to Build. And I just want you to know a couple of things before we get into this. When I say the word busy, I don't mean just the activity after activity after activity, the slammed schedules that we have. I also mean the mental load that many of us carry. Or even if we don't have a ton of stuff happening that day, our brains are just going and going and going, trying to think about everything that we've got to do, all of the things that we have on our plates. So I just share that. This isn't just, maybe you're in a season of life where you're like, I don't have a lot going on, but I have noticed that even when you don't have a lot going on, there can be a lot going on here. So that's the context for what we're going to get into today. But I wanted to share that the first place that I ever heard of busyness, really the first memory I have thinking about it, was when I was watching Veggie Tales as a kid. Some of you, or a lot of you, seem to know what that is. If you don't know what it is, it's an animated show about talking vegetables that tell Bible stories. It's great. It's a lot of fun. Even if you're an adult, they put jokes in there for you. It's great. But in this specific episode, Larry the cucumber is in the story of the Good Samaritan, and he's the guy who gets beat up and left on the side of the road. And so he is stuck head down in a hole, and he can't get out. And he's nervous and worried because he doesn't know how he's going to get out of this. And then Archibald Asparagus comes hopping down the road. And Archibald Asparagus sees Larry. They have a brief conversation, Larry sharing that he needs help. And in this specific episode, they're kind of doing like a Shakespearean poetic thing. And so Archibald Asparagus, with his British accent, which I cannot do, looks at him and goes, "Young man, I have noticed your dire situation, and please rest assured that I share your frustration. But how can I put this? What can I say? Maybe you'll understand better this way." And then the music starts. And it's like accordion music, and Archibald Asparagus proceeds to sing the song, "I'm busy, busy, dreadfully busy. You've no idea what I have to do. Busy, busy, shockingly busy, much, much too busy for you." And he sings that song and then proceeds to have a short conversation with Larry, followed by two more verses that is a duet with another asparagus who comes walking down the road, who has the same problem with busyness. They sing those songs and then walk off saying toodaloo. The ironic part about that is the whole time that they're singing this entire song, they're standing feet away from Larry, who still needs help. But they were too busy to help. I'm busy. You're busy. No, I won't do the song. We're all busy. In the Inland Empire especially, it feels like life is busy. In Southern California, it feels like life never stops. And if you're watching online, I'm sure that you might feel the same thing. You're like, yeah, life, it just keeps going even here. But at some point, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is that doing to us? What are our busy lives doing to us? What is the impact of all of that busyness on us? And there's a guy in the Bible who might have something to say about that, and his name is Haggai. And Haggai is a prophet towards the end of the Jewish story in the Old Testament. And he has just a short book. It's just a couple of chapters. I'd be surprised if many of us have read it, or if you read it, you probably don't remember what was in it. And so Haggai, short book, not a lot in there, but it's important. He's speaking to a really specific point in the Jewish story, and the message comes all the way down to us here in 2025 in Loma, California. And what he primarily will care about in the early part of the book is this phrase: consider your ways. Consider your ways. If you were to put it in modern language, what are you pursuing? What is the impact of what you're pursuing? Those two questions. Consider your ways. You could say it. What are you pursuing, and what is the impact of what you are pursuing? And that's what we're going to talk about today. What are we pursuing? What impact has that had on our life? And how is that all wrapped up in with busyness? And so maybe we just start off at the beginning. This might be a jogging your memory sort of moment, or this might be you hearing this for the first time. But let's do the SparkNotes version of the Jewish story. It will start off with a guy named Abraham, who is told by God that he's going to be the father of a great nation. And that great nation, all of his descendants, would be given a special land by God. They would be his special people, and they would have a special mission. And here's the mission statement of the whole venture. You ready? It's that they are blessed to be a blessing. In Genesis 12, they are blessed by God so that they might bless the world. That's the whole point of the whole thing. And so that's where that starts out. That's their mission statement. But then, centuries after Abraham, God tells his people, hey, listen, I want to live with you. I'd like to live among you. So would you build me a house so that I could do so? And so they first build a temporary structure that goes around with them as they're a nomadic people, until finally they build a permanent structure called the temple that was in Jerusalem, their capital city. So here is God, their king, living with them in their capital city of Jerusalem. Now, this relationship between God and the Jewish people has a couple of key factors. And the first has to do with God, the second has to do with them. With God, this is the key factors. God is our king. God lives among us in the temple, and God is the one who blesses us. They would live in alignment, they would pursue living in alignment with their king, and they would pursue being a blessing to the world. That's kind of the special relationship that they have. Unfortunately, the story of the Jewish people and God, and also the modern church in God, is a roller coaster. It starts off and has many highs over the course of the story of closeness and alignment with God, and then it has many lows and then lower lows of distance from God. And usually where it will start out is actually quite small. They'll start to just adopt some of the gods and start to worship them of the people around them. And those gods, they inspired certain cultures in those people. And so not only are you adopting the God, but now you're adopting the cultures that come with it. And so they start to adopt that. And over time, as they do that more and more, it impacts their whole society. The people of Israel would become a people who are known by God, at least, as people who oppress the poor, people who oppress the foreigner living among them, and people who oppress those at the margins of society. That's what God will rail against them for when he speaks to the prophets. And that's the thing. As that all happens, as the lows get lower and lower, including getting to the point where some of the Israelites are sacrificing their own children to these other gods in order to gain blessing and a reversal of their fortunes from those gods, as the lows get lower and lower and lower, God starts to express his feelings and his decisions through people called prophets. And those prophets have a really primary function in Scripture. They primarily will call people out for their rebellion against God or their rebellion against their king. If you put it another way, they will primarily call people out for what they are pursuing. Most of the time, at least by the prophets, it's not God. So they're calling people out for what they are pursuing. But additionally, the prophets will share a terrible vision of what the impact of those pursuits will be. And as we get to that, I just want to share a summary. If you took all of the prophets at the end of the Old Testament and summarized the messages that they were trying to share with the people, here's what it might be. It starts off with what you ought to be pursuing, O people of God. This is what they might have said. You ought to be pursuing a life of allegiance to God and acting in alignment with his heart and being a blessing to others. That's what you ought to be pursuing. But here's what you are pursuing, O people of God. You are pursuing the gods who fulfill your personal desires. You are pursuing the gods of all of these other people, and all of those other people's gods are about fulfilling your personal desires. You'd go to those gods, and you'd bring a sacrifice, and you'd say, here, this is what I'm giving over, and I need fertility, I need abundance, I need to thrive, I need you to defeat my enemies, or I need you to reverse my fortunes in life, or anything like that. And so you give this little sacrifice, and the God would see that and be pleased, and then give you whatever you asked for. That was the relationship. And so these gods are primarily about me fulfilling my personal desires, and they are simply a pathway to that. So what does this train you to do, O people of God? What is the impact on your life? Well, it will train you to pursue your personal desires above all else. Well, and what will that do to your relationship with God? Well, that creates a dissonance between you and God, because God is all about others-centered love. Meanwhile, you're over here all about your own personal fulfillment. And there's the dissonance there. And because of that dissonance, you start saying, well, I don't want that king. I want to rule my own little kingdom. Well, what does that all do to your relationship with others? Well, when you're the center of your own world, when you're the ruler of your own little kingdom, you have to protect it from everything around you. And people as close as your spouse, all the way out to those on the margins of society, the people we mentioned earlier, anybody in between can become a threat to you, especially when they are a threat to your comfort, to your success, to your time, or to your attention. And so now they are a threat to you, and you're going to treat them accordingly. Well, what is all of this going to do to your life overall, O people of God? Well, when you are ruling over your own life, when you are the ruler of your own kingdom, you are left to your own devices. You only have what you have, meaning that you have to rule over your own life now with your own strength, with your own foresight, with your own wisdom, with your own ability to control things. That's all you've got. Put another way, you're left to build and to defend your life with only your own limited strength and wisdom. And then the prophets have a bigger picture impact, that terrible vision that I talked about earlier of what the impact of this way of pursuing things will go. And this is what they would say. Forces that are more powerful than you will eventually overcome you and strip you of the life that you had or that you wanted. And we see that all come true in this summary of events at the end of 2 Chronicles chapter 36. This is what it will say. The Lord, the God of their ancestors, repeatedly sent his prophets to warn them. For he had compassion on his people, he loved his people, and on his temple, his home, his house, among them. But the people mocked these messengers of God, and they despised their words. And they scoffed at the prophets until the Lord's anger could no longer be restrained and nothing could be done. So the Lord brought the king of Babylon against them. This is a massive empire that had arisen just to the east of them. And so the Babylonians show up at their doorstep and invade and put siege to their city, and they kill the Jewish young men, even chasing after them into the temple. They had no pity on the people, killing both young men and young women, the old and the infirm. God handed all of them over to the king of Babylon. Here we go. The king took home to Babylon all the articles, large and small, used in the temple of God, and the treasures from both the Lord's temple and from the palace of the king and his officials. And then his army burned the temple of God and tore down the walls of Jerusalem, burned down all the palaces, and completely destroyed everything of value. The few who survived were taken as exiles to Babylon, and they became servants to the king and his son until the kingdom of Persia came to power. So the message of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah, who was a prophet, was fulfilled. The land finally enjoyed its Sabbath rest, lying desolate until the 70 years were fulfilled, just as the prophet had said. You have to understand how traumatizing this would have been. For those of us who call America home, this would be the White House getting invaded and burned. For those who would be in the Catholic tradition, this is the Vatican being sacked. For those in the Islamic tradition, this is the Dome of the Rock, or Mecca, being torn down block by block. To bring it locally, just imagine the United States at war and enemy armies marching into Southern California. And they march into the Inland Empire, and so you have an army marching from the west through Fontana and Rialto, from the south through Corona and Riverside, from the east through Beaumont and Redlands, all converging on Loma Linda, burning houses, killing people, taking people captive as they go. And as they get closer and closer to Loma Linda, people are running and panicking and trying to figure out what to do. And people start running towards what feels like a safe place. They won't attack hospitals, and so they start running to our hospital over here. And as you're running, you happen to be nearby, and all of a sudden you look up at the hospital, and you see it in flames. Fire coming out of the windows, smoke pluming into the sky, so much fire and destruction all around you that it's blotted out the sun. And then as you're there, you see the church steeple at the top of this building come crashing down. And this is life as you know it, burning down around you. It's traumatizing, it's scary, it's terrifying. And in the middle of that, you go, where is God? Like, where is our God King, the one who was supposed to protect us and be with us? I mean, the Babylonians chased people into the temple of God, and it was like you weren't even there to protect them. For those of us who are Adventists and might identify with this place especially, be like, God, you told some Adventists in the past to start this university, to start this hospital, and now it's burning to the ground. Where are you? And here's what the prophets will respond with. This is the summary of an answer that they would give. God has given you over to pursue your own ways. And this right here is the culmination. This is the impact of what you have pursued. You wanted to go rule your own little kingdom. You wanted to go in your own strength. Well, here you are now being overcome by forces more powerful than you, and you are living in exile and displacement from the good life that God had for you. It's a brutal reality that they are living with. But the prophets have spoken about this destruction and this exile for decades. It's all throughout all of their books and all of their messages. But if you were to go read them, go read Isaiah, go read Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all these prophets, it'll be this destruction and terror and exhausting, like, oh my goodness, this is so much. And then all of a sudden you'll come upon a passage or a poem that is about the mercy and the compassion of God. That God was going to take him God was going to take them under his wings like a mother hen, that he was going to make streams through the desert. He was going to make oases in the desert for them to then go from Babylon all the way back home. God's mercy was going to be there all through it. And 70 years after this traumatic event, that all comes true. This massive empire called Persia rises up against Babylon, destroys it, and then the Persian king goes, hey, people of Israel, you can go back home to Jerusalem and you can rebuild your temple. And so just as God promised, they get to go home. And so many of them leave, and they travel for months to get to Jerusalem. And maybe you could just put yourself with them as they crest a hill and look over at Jerusalem. And as you get closer and closer, I mean, you would have kind of known this, but what you see as you get closer and closer is this relief, yeah, we're finally here, but also it's in ruins. And if you had been somebody who was in exile, who had actually been born and had been young enough to then be taken into exile, now you were coming back, what you see in front of you is a life that you're going to have to rebuild. If you're someone who was born in exile and now you're coming back or coming to this place for the first time, you're looking at a life you now have to build. And so I don't know where that might fit into your life. Maybe you're young enough where you're like, I've got a whole life to build in front of me. You're a teenager, undergrad, postgrad, whatever it is, and you're just thinking, okay, what's this life that I can construct from here? Maybe you're in a new season of life. Things have changed, you get a new job, you're finally, the kids are out of the house, or whatever it is, you're in a new season of life. Okay, what do I construct from here? What do I build from here? But maybe because of your own choices, or because of the choices of others, or because this is just a broken world, you have found yourself in that season after life burned down around you. And now you're thinking, okay, I'm finally past that enough to think about how do I build from here? How do I rebuild? Either way, wherever you're at, just put yourself there with these people of Israel, with the Jewish people, as they're looking at Jerusalem, and you might start to feel some of the feelings that they would have had, right? Like this excitement. We've got something new, something to do. Think about all that could happen here. You got this hope for the future, but there's also all this discouragement. There's so much to do. This is what life is. There's often just so much to do between here and where I want it to be. And so there's all of those feelings, but there's also this is going to take months to build, right? Like it's going to take months to rebuild the temple. It's going to take months to build the walls. It's going to take months for this to be livable. And so you start thinking about your current concerns, because I still got to figure out food for my family, and I got to still figure out where we're going to live. And so maybe when you're going into a building season or a rebuilding season in life, maybe the easiest place to start is the most tangible place, right? And so you maybe, okay, well, I'll start building a house. And so you go and you cut down some trees, and you gather some of the stone blocks that are laying around, and you're like, okay, I'm going to frame my house. So you frame your house. And that's going up. It's going up nicely, and it's looking good. And then finally, you're like, okay, well, I can now put a roof over it. And so you start putting the roof on. And you're starting to put the finishing touches on that, but now there's a storm coming and your neighbor's still framing their house. So maybe I should go help them finish their thing up. And then also my neighbor across the street needs some help too, so I'm going to spend the next week helping that person too. And then you go back to working on your house and you're like, okay, this is good. We're starting to finish this up. And then someone comes along and goes, hey, we need to clear some of the rubble over there so we can start building over there. And you're like, okay. Yeah, maybe can I help you with that next week? So now you're thinking, okay, what do I need to get done here so that I can help next week over there? And then also we got the temple that we're still trying to build, and the plans are being discussed and thought about there. And now, well, oh shoot, my son got sick. And so now my wife is at home, and she's stressed out because she's dealing with a sick toddler, and she's the mother of a newborn, and that's a lot to take on. And now you're thinking, okay, well, that's a lot. And also, I've got to figure out where we're going to get food for my family. And so you start thinking, oh, I could work for some of the locals who started inhabiting this place when we were gone for 70 years. And I could work for them because I know they've got some food, but if I work for them, that's going to push off all the project timelines here a lot, right? So that'd be part-time work here, part-time work here. I don't want to split my time like that. Maybe I'll just plant my own crop. I'll add that to my life. I'll plant a crop for ourselves, and then eventually that'll grow and we'll be able to harvest it. But then you realize after you plant it, it's actually not that simple, because instead of just waiting to be able to harvest it, now you've got to think about what you're adding to your day, because now I've got to water this every day. And now there's a gopher in there, and I hate gophers. And that's not the story speaking, that's me. But I hate gophers. And now I've got to build an entire fence around this thing and dig down so that they don't get in. I got to get rid of that gopher. And is that a little spot on a plant? Is that an insect eating my plants? Oh no. And now you have stuff to worry about. Like, is there going to be rain this season? Are the bugs going to eat all my plants so that I don't even have food at the end of this? And if I don't have food, well, then the livestock won't have any food, so that means no milk, and that means no eggs. And on top of that, what if this does go well? What if we have a lot of crops, and then what if we don't have any place to store them? So now I got to think about building an addition onto my house. So now I'm thinking about, okay, what's that addition going to look like and all of that? And then, am I putting enough away for retirement? And the rent just got raised $300. And so now I got to think about taking a side job for that. And my kids are starting basketball next week, so now I got to make sure we have enough supply or their equipment for them, and we got to figure out our schedule too to make sure that we can make it to practice and back. And then also, my email inbox is so full. I've got 10 to 15 messages I got to reply to by the end of the day, and there's more I should probably get to already. And on top of that, my spouse is working nights, and so that's shifted our schedule so much, and that's really chaotic. And then on top of that too, I want to be healthy. Like, I do want to be healthy, so I should work out. And if I'm going to work out, that's going to add an hour to my day, or at least an hour and a half, because then I got to get to the gym, come back, take a shower, all that stuff, so I'm gonna have to get up earlier. And on top of that, I wanna eat healthy. If I wanna eat healthy, that means I can't eat out as much as I have been. That's super convenient, because they make the food for me. Now I've gotta make a list, and now I've gotta go shopping, and now I've gotta meal prep, and now I've gotta meal plan, and all of that. And then on top of that, what am I ever gonna do about this calendar that is so full of everything? And then on top of that, I planned a trip when the calendar was so clear and so empty, and then so many things got scheduled around it. So now I'm stressed, and I'm about to go on the trip. And on top of that, now my spouse was like, hey, we've been living here for a few years. We should remodel our kitchen. And you're like, yeah, we have enough money. We should remodel the kitchen. So now we're remodeling the kitchen, and we're living off of a camp stove while we do that. And then my kid is about to outgrow their bed. And you're like, okay, well, now we've got to go to IKEA next week in order to make sure that, and then all of a sudden, there's a knock at your door. And it's Haggai. And he's like, hey, listen, guys, God asked me to share a question that he has with everybody. So I've been kind of going around all the houses. And anyways, here's the question he wanted to ask. Is it a time for you to dwell in your paneled house, in our words, upgraded house, while my house lies in ruin? And you don't look away from Haggai. You're still looking at him, but just over his shoulder on the horizon is the spot where the temple ought to be. And it's noticeably empty. And you just feel the burning absence of that. And then you don't turn around. You're still looking, but behind you, you feel the presence of that kitchen that's halfway through being remodeled. And your phone that you left on the couch while you got up to answer the door that has an overflowing email inbox, and that calendar that's scheduled out for 3 weeks. And someone texted you, and that text on your phone, someone's like, hey, we should get together sometime soon. You're looking through your calendar like, I don't know how I'm going to fit that in. And then at the back of your mind, you have that work day from yesterday where you didn't even take a lunch because you just kept going and going and going to meet all the demands that you felt like you had to meet. And also in your head, you just feel the presence of that mental load that you've been carrying. Because now Haggai, he's also just like, he's disrupting the whole thing. And also on top of that, I got to think about what I got to do today and tomorrow and next week and all of that. And you realize in the middle of that, all of a sudden, that you have barely even considered God's presence in your life for who knows how long, because you've become caught up in every pressing matter that could possibly exist. For them, It was, you guys have been building your houses and the temple still isn't built. But for us, it might be something more like the Spirit of God has not had a place to dwell in my heart, in my head, in my life, because I have filled it to the brim with so many important and pressing things. And Haggai will then continue. And he says, also, this is what God has to say. Consider your ways. And if you're hearing this in the Hebrew, you hear the connotation, which is think about the pathway that you've been on that brought you here. And now look forward at where that pathway is taking you. Consider your ways. And Haggai is going to kind of answer that. Consider your ways. Well, I'll tell you a little bit of what's happened so far. And this is what he says. You have sown much and harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you seem to never have your fill. You clothe yourselves, but yet no one is warm. And those of you who earn wages do so to put them into a bag with holes. And as Haggai is speaking and saying these things, you start to recognize this feeling coming up from within you that you've been pushing down and down and down with all of your busyness, which is that you have been going and going and going and going and going to diminishing returns. Because you get these highs from busyness, feeling like there's excitement, things are happening, I'm important, I matter, I'm helping, I'm needed, there's something to do, all of that, but those highs are getting less and less and less and less high. You consume or you eat and you're never filled. Well, you consume and you consume and you consume content, strategies for self-improvement, food, mindless reels, experiences, and yet the desire that you seem to be trying to satiate is never satiated. And then you clothe yourself with maybe material, like I got to go to the latest shopping sale or whatever, or maybe it's like Joshua talked about in the video, all of these markers of wealth. I'm going to fill my life with more people or more things, and that excitement is what makes me feel like I matter, and you clothe yourself with that, or maybe a social media persona, or an aura of a busy parent, or someone who's a hard worker and dependable, and if anyone asks me to do anything, I'll show up. But it doesn't matter what you put on yourself. It just feels like you brought too light of a jacket in the middle of winter. And then you have this whatever you gain, whether it's status or notoriety or money or security, it just feels like it's disappearing in a bank account or a wallet or through your hands that are full of holes. Consider your ways. It's those two important questions from the beginning. What are you pursuing? And what impact has that been having on your life? Have you, in pursuit of what felt like good and important and pressing things, found yourself living a busy, filled, chaotic life that has diminishing returns and little satisfaction and a noticeable absence of the power of God? If you have, then maybe, I say maybe, it's because in all of the busyness, God has had little or maybe even no space to dwell. And now listen, I've heard statements like that expressed as, in a way, that caused shame. I've heard it expressed in ways or in words that pretty much communicate, why aren't you prioritizing this? This is obviously the most important thing. You should value God more than anything else. Why are you not just doing that? You should spend a thoughtful hour every morning doing that thing where you read your Bible and all that. Why aren't you just prioritizing all of that? And I've heard that in a way that creates shame. And that's a lot. But one thing that I've had to do in my life, and I hope this is meaningful for many of you, is to recognize that God is not the people who have said it that way. What if Haggai is showing up at your door because the compassionate and gracious God is asking you to adequately assess the current reality of your life? Not to shame you, not to be like, you need to do better, but rather coming alongside you as, hey, how's it going? Because you've been living life this way, and how has that been treating you? Like genuinely, just how has that actually been impacting you? How are you doing? Has there been the fruit of my presence in your life, the fruit of the Spirit dwelling in you, in your life? Because if that was the case, then I think we might recognize that there'd be some love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Or has it been the fruit of busyness? Because those often manifest themselves as irritability and anxiety and exhaustion and reactivity to everything and impatience, restlessness, unfulfillment, distraction, or instead of self-control, coping behaviors of just trying to figure out how to get away from everything that's pressing in on me. Which one has it been? And as all of this is kind of swimming around in your mind, Haggai then will say this again. He goes, now this is what the Lord wants to say to you. Consider your ways. And whenever someone in Scripture repeats something almost verbatim, they're trying to emphasize something. And what's cool is he will start off this way, consider your ways, and then tell you all of the ways it hasn't gone well for you just before this. But now he's going to take a different tactic. He's going to start out saying, consider your ways, and then take you somewhere else. He's going to say this on behalf of God. Go up to the hills and bring wood and build my house, that I may take pleasure in it and that I may be glorified, says the Lord. And as Haggai is saying that to you from your doorway, you start to realize something. That God is making one simple ask of your life. It's not easy. What he's just asked you to do is to go chop down trees, drag them to the spot, and build a building. Okay, that's not easy. But the goal, the pursuit, is incredibly simple. Build a space for me to dwell in. Funny enough, God's asking them to build out of wood. The previous one, blocks, gold, linen, all this stuff. God's just like, just build me a basic frame house. That's it. Would you just do that? And you realize that that simple ask on your life is this. God's saying to you, would you stop your chaotic, exhausting, and elusive pursuit of your own kingdom? And would you simply build a place for me to dwell with you and to be your king? Would you stop your chaotic, exhausting, elusive pursuit of your own kingdom? And would you build a place for me to dwell with you and be your king? Haggai is continuing the messaging of all the prophets before him. Changes it a little bit, but pretty much the same, because he's pretty much starting off with, here's what you ought to be pursuing, O people of God, both there and to us all the way here. You ought to be pursuing is a life with room for God's presence. That's what he's encouraging. But here's what you are pursuing, O people of God. And the reason there's question marks there is because what Haggai is saying to the people in that time is you have pursued building a life here that got to the point where now you are upgrading your houses. You have time to make them luxurious, and then you're just pursuing the next thing after the next thing after the next thing. You've had time to do that while the Lord's house sits in ruin over there. God has had no space to dwell among you. And he's saying that to them then. I don't know what Haggai might say to you today. And so the invitation today is going to be to ask yourself, what am I pursuing? What have I been pursuing? But even if we just leave that blank, I can tell you this. If you have been pursuing something other than a life with space for God's presence, I can tell you what it's doing to you. What it's doing to you is it's training you to pursue your personal desires over anything else. Good, important, pressing things, absolutely. But it's training you to pursue your own personal desires above all else. And what is that doing to your relationship with God? It's creating that dissonance. Saying, God, I know you want something else, but I've got my own thing to do. I need to do this. This is important. Creating distance between you and resulting in you ruling your own kingdom. What is that doing to your relationship with others? It's causing you to live primarily out of the fruits of busyness, out of not being present, that irritability, that reactiveness, all the things we talked about earlier. Well, what is that doing to your life overall? It is leaving you with only your own strength, with only your own bandwidth, with only your own energy to pull from. And what is the impact overall of that, of the pursuit of something other than God and space for him in your life? What does that result ultimately? What is the impact of it all? Well, it's the same thing as it was for the people who were taken into exile. It's that at some point, forces that are more powerful than you will eventually overcome you and strip you of the life that you had or that you wanted. Except at this point, it's likely not an enemy army. It's despair, anxiety, that feeling of meaninglessness because you've been running on a hamster wheel for however long. It's what Joshua's story describes, where you finally end up with a total collapse of the home. It's those moments of burnout, poor physical health or poor mental health as a result of all of it. It's those broken or shallow relationships that you couldn't put the time into that were needed. These are the forces that will eventually overcome you, that you are powerless to fight against. But God, in His mercy, is inviting you and I to tell a different story. One in which we pursue something different that has a different impact in our life. And here's what we are invited to pursue. You are invited to pursue a life with space for God's presence. And what will that do to you? Well, it trains you to pursue His kingdom and His righteousness, and all the rest will be added. His kingdom, He has a good agenda for the world and for you that's better than you have. So pursue that. Pursue His righteousness. Righteousness means right relationship, meaning that God is truly faithful. God is truly good, even when you fall short. So stop focusing on all the ways that you're falling short and look to Him, who it doesn't matter if you've been pursuing everything else. He has still been faithful. So pursue those things and all the rest will be added. Well, what will that do to your relationship with God? Well, that draws harmony between you and God. And it puts you in your right relational place because you don't have to be a rebel vying for equal power with God. Now you get to be His loved child, a junior partner in what He's doing in the world. What is that going to do to your relationship with others? Well, over time, as the Spirit gets a foothold in your life, has a home in your heart, over the long period of obedience, of following Jesus, people start to experience the fruits of that Spirit coming out of you. Love and joy and peace and patience and all the rest. And what is ultimately that impact, or what does that do to your life overall? Well, now, instead of leaving you to rely on your own limited power, guess what? This is good news, church. You get to rest in the King's power, in the King's foresight, in the King's wisdom. And what is the overall impact that's going to have on your life? And I'll tell it to you this way. It is a life, though difficult and challenging at many points, that is characterized by the presence and the blessing of God, and also a life that is marked by blessing others. It's the mission statement from the very beginning of the whole Jewish story. You and I, church, those of us who are not part of the Jewish ethnic line, we have all been adopted into that family by Jesus Christ. That mission statement to the Jewish people in Genesis 12 is yours and mine today. And a life lived pursuing space for God's presence, well, guess what that leads to over time? It leads to a life marked by experiencing God's presence and blessing, and a life lived to bless others. Now, today, we won't have the time to go over all of the ways in which we can pursue a life with space for God's presence. We'll do that next week. But what I want to encourage all of us to do this week is to do something together, which is to consider those two questions. What have you been pursuing? What have I been pursuing? And what impact is that having on your life? What's the honest, real impact it's having on you? And if your answer to that, after you've taken some time to process that and think through that, is like, listen, I really have been pursuing a life with space for God's presence. And over time, I've just seen the fruit of that, and I want to just honor that. But maybe you're going to come to the opposite conclusion, like, Lord, I have been pursuing things that are not you, not your presence in my life. In fact, I have been pursuing everything else, and I have been feeling all of those things, the diminishing returns, life slipping through my fingers and all the rest. I've been feeling all of that. Well, here's what I want to encourage you to do if that is your recognition. I want you to lay that out before God. Honestly. Lord, this is honestly what I have been pursuing. Because that is the first step to pursuing a life with space for God's presence. Here, Lord, you have the space in my life to see all of this. You and I are invited to do this, to pursue a life with space for God's presence. The result of which, the impact of which, is a life marked by experiencing the presence and the blessing of God, and a life marked by blessing others. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much that in the middle of this chaos and busyness in this modern Southern California world, really just the modern Western world and even beyond, and that in the middle of that, you offer us an abundant life. And I know, Lord, that this is challenging for us. Many of us will have to come to grips with the reality that our life has become filled to the brim. And we may struggle with, what do I even do about that? But Lord, I just thank you that during this week, you're going to walk with us, a journey towards that moment where we're finally able to just lay out everything before you. And I know that you will meet us there. Thank you for being a good Father who loves us deeply. In your name, amen.